Hello, and thank you for coming back to watch some more Civil War Wild West edition. While I'm almost done with and still wrapping up part 3 of the Confederate territory of Arizona, and also working on a special documentary analyzing the hard evidence for black Southerners in the Army, Navy, various militias, and their experiences as body servants, today I want to talk about some Civil War Western fiction. There is some pretty good literature out there that covers the Civil War specifically west of the Mississippi River, and then there's a lot of other literature that deals with the after effects of the Civil War and Reconstruction in the Wild West. The short novel that we're going to take a quick look at today comes from this issue of Zane Grey's Western magazine. Some good old-fashioned Western pulp fiction from the year 1952. This beautiful little pulp magazine is 70 years old, but it's still holding up in good condition, and I'm very proud to own it. I really like branded fiction. Zane Grey is not the only one who had branded fiction put out under his name. Back then, pulp magazines were popular, but today you still see a lot of branded fiction being released under Ralph Compton's name or William Johnstone's name. This issue of Zane Grey's Western from December 1952 actually has 2 pieces that relate to the Civil War in the Wild West, and I really like what they offer for analysis. The main feature of this issue, which is on the cover, is Wire to Warlock, a short novel by Norman Fox. This was printed in Zane Grey's Western in 1952 as Wire to Warlock, although Mr. Fox expanded the novel and then published it under the title Long Lightning in 1953. Wire to Warlock takes place in the early to mid 1880s in some desert, I think it's Arizona, and the protagonist, whose name is Brandon, happens to be a Confederate veteran from Texas. His team has been tasked with stringing the last stretch of telegraph wire for their company's telegraph line in a very dangerous stretch of territory where people keep getting attacked by this crazy man. We quickly find out that this elderly gentleman is a Confederate colonel who really honestly believes that the Civil War is still going on. It kind of reminds me of the stories of the Japanese holdouts after World War II. This story also features what some people would call a black Confederate, although it's not quite what you would think. The black character's name is Domingo, and he stays with the Confederate colonel, retired Colonel Templeton, even though he doesn't believe he's retired, mostly out of loyalty and pity. Colonel Templeton actually made Domingo a captain in Templeton's Confederate forces, which basically means that this one black guy is a one-man army. And that's supposed to be the comedic irony of the character and the situation. This is definitely not a lost cause story. And the character Domingo definitely knows what's going on, and he's just playing along out of loyalty to this guy who he clearly feels sorry for. But the narrative makes it clear that he's not happy about it. One thing about Wire to Warlock / Long Lightning that makes me very uncomfortable is it's definitely a product of its time, and there is some racist language in it. I really don't think Norman Fox meant any harm by it. It's just that the language that he uses to describe the black character is far from dignified. And Mr. Fox really likes describing the character's lips in ways that make me uncomfortable. That said, reading some super lost cause porn like Gone with the Wind, which is an excellent novel with a hell of a plot, but it is lost cause porn, it makes Wire to Warlock look like an all-inclusive episode of Sesame Street. The main conflict in the story is between competing telegraph companies. One telegraph company, which hires Brandon, obviously represents good values, moral behavior, people who follow the straight and narrow and who do things honestly. And then there's the other company, which hires outlaws to try and kill Brandon and his team, and make it impossible for them to complete the telegraph line. And then further complicating this private war in the Three Sisters Valley is Colonel Templeton, who is still fighting the Civil War 20 years later. Despite its flaws, Wire to Warlock / Long Lightning is an entertaining novel, and it does give you a really nice taste of what the Confederacy looked like out in the Wild West. The character of Colonel Templeton, the Confederate holdout colonel in the desert, is supposed to be comedic relief, but he's actually kind of a semi-accurate portrayal of some of the pro-Confederate bushwhackers who continued attacking Union soldiers and sabotaging Union supplies long after the Confederate Army had been swept from New Mexico and Confederate Arizona. If you can get a copy of the December 1952 issue of Zane Grey's Western on eBay, or if you can find a used paperback copy of the expanded edition, that being Long Lightning by Norman Fox, check it out. It's worth a read if you can't get enough of the Civil War in the Wild West. Here's an excerpt from Wire to Warlock by Norman Fox. Kirk Halliday came riding up from Salish in an open buggy the next morning. He raised a hand in salute. "I've had a long talk with Sam Whitcomb, Brandon. He's approved your change of route. He said your judgment has never failed him yet. He knows your record better than I do. Maybe I was hasty the other night." As green an olive branch as a man could offer him, Brandon admitted in his mind. "Supplies have been coming through steady," he said. "That's Salish's doing. Likely you've had a hand in seeing that everything runs smooth down there. I'm grateful, mister. I'll be wiring my thanks from Warlock in a few weeks." Halliday scanned the sweep of valley to the northward. "Any trouble with the eccentric who ran our surveyors out of here? The crazy one? Not a sign of him." "Good," Halliday grunted, and was soon on his way southward again. The next day, an advanced post-hole digger's yell fetched Brandon on the bound. Topping a slight rise to the west was a tall, stately rider, lean of face, with a carefully trimmed silver beard. He wore the full regalia of a Confederate colonel of cavalry, complete to the saber. The post-hole digger spat a stream of tobacco juice. "Now what the hell? Is this Confederate Memorial Day?" "Take another look, friend," Brandon advised. "You've only seen half the show." A second rider had bobbed over the rise to range alongside the first. This second man was the giant Negro. Domingo wore range garb, but he now held himself with military stiffness. The two came forward, the black keeping at the heels of the colonel's horse. When they were near enough, the soldier raised a gauntleted hand in courteous salute. "Who's in charge here?" "I am," Brandon said, and identified himself by name. Box T brand on both horses, he noticed. "I, sir," said the soldier, "am Colonel Templeton, Allen Templeton, at present attached to General Longstreet's command, as is my companion, Captain Israel Domingo, a freeman. I perceive that you're constructing a telegraph line. For whom, may I ask?" Some whispered warning deep in his mind gave Brandon an inkling of what the proper answer should be, and so forged the lie for him. "Our superiors are located in New Orleans," he said. "New Orleans! New Orleans, sir, is in Yankee hands. General Butler holds the city, and Farragut's fleet hammers at Vicksburg." He turned quickly to the silent Domingo. "You've deployed our troops properly, Captain? We have this camp completely surrounded?" Domingo said solemnly, "Your orders have been carried out, sir," a note of sadness in his voice. That smothered the laughter that had begun building in Brandon. This, then, was the eccentric holding forth in the Valley of the Three Sisters, who had kept mountain telegraph surveyors out, forcing them to choose a longer route to Warlock. The man was mad. So mad that for him, time stood still. Nearly 2 decades after the Peace of Appomattox, the war that belonged to the yesterdays remained in actuality to Colonel Allen Templeton. What was it Doc King had said in Salish when Brandon had asked about the eccentric of the Three Sisters? "I could tell you a great deal about him, but the person happens to be both my friend and my patient." And the girl, the one called Miss Ellen, who had come with the same Israel Domingo to save a trapped mountain telegraph man, and to ask that man not to enter the Valley of the Three Sisters? Holt Brandon could see her face in Allen Templeton's, and another riddle was solved. He could understand why she hadn't wanted to explain the madness of her father. Now a man stood before him who opposed the telegraph line, and you had to subdue this man with a different weapon from one you'd use against another. You could draw your gun on a Champ McCoy, but not against an Allen Templeton. "I'm a Texan myself, sir," Brandon said, "and I give you a Confederate's word of honor that this telegraph is a private enterprise, having nothing to do with the war." "A Texan? Then why aren't you in uniform? You appear able-bodied, and no enterprise can be considered as having nothing to do with the war as long as there is a war. I perceive that you and your men are not properly armed for combat, and the fact that I came here under a sort of truce stays my hand. I shall return within the week. If I find you and your men still here, I'll have no choice but to order a charge." "Now look," Brandon began. "Good day, sir," Templeton said emphatically. Behind Templeton, Domingo shook his great head, his eyes sad. In his face was a plea for tolerance and understanding. The other story from this issue of Zane Grey's Western that I wanted to touch on takes place during the Civil War, and it takes place in Indian Territory, which is fantastic. because there's not enough material that covers that particular neck of the woods. But that story is going to get its own video. Thank you for waiting for the Confederate Territory of Arizona Part 3. I'm almost done with it. It'll be out soon. And once again, thank you for coming back to watch the Civil War Wild West Edition. Make sure you've liked and subscribed.